Hi, this is Jim Janossy. I'm going to go through a little preview of the ebook for CSC 200 now. This is the better version of the ebook, which I posted on January the 4th. I want to show you my suggestions on how you access this electronically and how you print it if you desire to print it to use it in that form. I've located the ebook on my hard drive as if I had copied it down from the website. If I double-click on it as a PDF file, it will open up on most computers with the Adobe Reader. Now it opens up this way, and it gives me something like a very large version of it here, 139%. You could do this and get it down to 100%, but that still means it's going to be awkward to see. What I think you're going to want to do to get a better understanding of how this workbook works and how the pages are set up to be facing pages, what you'd really want to do is go here to View and to go to Page Display, Two-Page View. If you do that, and if you also have this clicked, you'll see first of all just one page because that's the cover. It's really important for you to understand this because it dictates which pages will face one another. This ebook is really intended to be a printed document, and starting in the spring the publisher will have it ready in that form. Right now you're getting this ebook as an ebook because I can provide it to you in that form as the copy that's heading towards the publisher. And the publisher will take a few weeks to get this into the shape to have it printed. Not in time for the winter term, but in time for the spring term. So you don't have to buy the book now. It will be fairly inexpensive as a printed workbook anyway. Let me show you this view though. On the page display, if this is not clicked, this Show Cover Page in Two-Page View, it starts off with the cover on the left-hand page, and then everything goes kind of askew. Because from this point on, when you look at it, pages will face one another that were not intended to face one another. It's not the biggest thing in the world, and you can still read this, but it's intended really that this be viewed as if it were a printed workbook, and that means that the page is by itself. So the way to do this would be to get into View, Page Display, and then click this one, Show Cover Page in Two-Page View. When you do that, it will start with the cover just on one page. Now let's just go through this workbook so I can show you some of the features of it. Here's the first two pages. I've cut this down from the one that some of you had downloaded originally because I really thought in looking at it that the organization was a little too cumbersome and that I had been a little too verbose. So all that's going on here is a page set up with a topic, in this case the welcome, and here an overview of what's coming at you in the first 4 units of this course, and this symbol and this clickable URL, which is very short so that it's easy for you to enter manually if you need to. In this case, with an electronic book, you can actually click on it, and when you do, you'll go to a place where there's a video where I explain something of this page. This symbol can be scanned by a smart cell phone or an iPod, an iPad, a tablet computer with a camera, and it will get you to this location on your mobile device. This is a quick response code. You'll learn about them in this course. The idea is, in using it here, it makes this book handier for you if you wish to read this or study this and the videos someplace where you're not near a computer. For some of you, that might be very handy. Wherever you see a hyperlink like this, that is in yellow with a box around it, that's active. If I click this here, I'm actually at the course website. And I'm back here viewing the workbook in the Adobe Reader. So the next page just explains to you a bit about how the course progresses. The first 9 weeks are the part where you're doing work from this workbook that involves using the computer. The 10th week is dedicated to the reflective work that's a part of any liberal studies program course, as this one is in the science area. Pages 4 and 5, here's the way the course is broken down into 4 units of work and then the reflective assignment. The only reason for including this page is to give you a handier way to see the entire term. The dark lines here separate the 10 weeks of the term into the units that we're using in this course, which I also use in another course that I teach, GPH 205. A few of you are actually enrolled in both these courses. You'll be happy to know that both courses follow exactly the same schedule. You won't have to worry about a unit ending in one course and not in the other because they're both identically timed. This is the way your course grades are computed. Although there's a similar chart in GPH 205, the values are a bit different. This first unit is 3 weeks in length, but it only counts for 10% of your course grade. I do that because if it takes you a little while to get geared up, you shouldn't think that you're damaging your chances of getting a good grade early in the course. The amount of credit per unit builds up. Unit 2 you only have 2 weeks on. Unit 3 is 20%. And finally, Unit 4 is 24%. So there's always more coming down the pike. And in case you've done poorly in the first part of the course, you should realize the bulk of the grade is in the last part of the course. There's also the possibility of extra credit, which can add, in this case, up to 6 points on a 100-point scale, which is really quite significant. The online exercises count for as much as anything else in this course. That's something we're going to spend some time talking about, because you'll have to understand that those exercises are for learning purposes. They're not quizzes. The grade does count, but within the unit you can do the exercise any number of times, and most people do them many times using a method that I'll describe for you in order to raise their score to the highest possible level. And that's explained a bit more here. Now, starting on page 7 is the actual reading part of Unit 1. Let's talk about the subject matter of Unit 1, how computers came to be. And we start very simply in that by talking about how we convey information one human to another without the use of language or speech. So we start taking a look at signals, a very simple signal. We look at another way to arrange signals based on that signal that Paul Revere used, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Let's talk about the implications of having 2 lanterns and how much information we might be able to express with that. Then let's use a different example. Let's take 3 of something that can be in one of 2 different states. Here it's either yellow or blue. How many different combinations of those patterns are there so that we can have a different message, a different something associated with each one of these patterns? Let's take a look at alphabets. There are 2 ways that we use symbols to represent a language that's otherwise spoken. We can either use pictures that stand for whole things, or we can use individual letters that are grouped together to form words. This is the way that we think about computer usage in connection with encoding information, at least in the English-speaking world. And I've used an example here of Greek. Greek is not English, but it's also a language made up of individual letters that form words. So Greek could be expressed in the kind of computer code that we're going to be talking about. This page will show you how English letters, H in this case, is encoded in 8 different on-offs. That is 8 bits. And we need that many. We talk a bit about, not to coin a pun there, we talk a bit about how many of these individual on-off patterns we need in order to express enough different combinations for the amount of letters and numbers and punctuation symbols that we use in the language. If we think about information being encoded this way, in on-off patterns, and we can express them electronically, then we're thinking about the way the computer works. Every key, when pressed, generates one of these patterns, and it's stored in memory. And the screen interprets what that pattern means. Once we have information stored in those patterns, we can develop electrical circuits that can examine, here only 2 different bits, but perhaps we want to link these together to examine all 8 bits of a letter or a byte, as we call it, and make decisions based on them. This is just a very brief introduction to the fact that there are these things called gates in electronic circuits, and it's the combination of those gates, the hardware, that decides what the electrical bits, that is the information, means and what to do with it. These are built up into very complicated circuits with millions of circuit elements, transistors, to form a computer. Once we have information in the memory of a computer in this form, it can be copied. That is, that bit pattern can be copied to various storage medium, like CDs, or like a flash drive, or to a printer where the bit patterns are translated into printable letters that we can understand. The screen, which also translates those bit patterns into things that we can see. This is the magic of computers. By storing information this way, we can move it around, and we can use circuits like this to make decisions based on it. And that's the essence of computers. With that much technical information having been said, we can think about representing these different kinds of things with electrical bit patterns. What I've just mentioned happens to be text, that is letters, but we can also use different bit patterns to represent the values that make up a sound wave, or that make up the colors in a picture. Or we can take those pictures represented electronically and flash them up one after another very quickly on the screen as if it were a movie projector, and the rapid replacement of one image with another, each one slightly different from the one before it, gives the eye the illusion of smooth motion. So we have video. I wanted to include in here something about actual computing equipment of today. Here's something about the Computer Electronics Show, which is coming up now in 2012. The one last year had a lot of information coming forth from vendors about what they plan to do with tablet computers. In fact, I've included one little video here, and you can get to it with this symbol on a mobile device, where one vendor is touting one or another competitor to the iPad. The iPad from Apple is what kicked off this whole revolution in tablet computing. Now, this article is only 2 pages long, and it comes from a trade publication, Network World. It's a handy way for me to highlight for you various terms that you should be familiar with, and I've given you the definition of those terms here. So these definitions are keyed to this article. And it's kind of handy for you to learn these terms in that way, because here you see a definition, but here you see the word used in context, so you have some better idea of what it means. As a part of one of those definitions, Netbook, I thought it handy to put this chart together to give you some idea of computers from the very largest down to the very smallest. And the 2 columns represent commercial computers, which are machines that are used in organizations but typically not used by individuals or owned by individuals, and computers that are small enough, in descending order here of size, that are used by individuals. So this chart will help you understand that definition, and netbooks fall right here in that chart. Take a look at these definitions. They're going to be important for you. Definitions continue on page 25 with these words, fragments, kilo and mega. Kilo being 1,000, mega being millions. We use them for quantities greater than 0, as this chart indicates, here in multiples of something, 10 to a various power, making the numbers bigger, and here 10 to a negative power, making for very small quantities. The ones I've outlined in red are the ones you're typically going to run across in advertising and in articles about computers today. On page 26, I've listed for you the 3 items of work that you're responsible for in Unit 1. These are things that you complete on the computer in the case of the repeatable exercises. You get to it with this link. You might be able to do the exercises using a mobile device and this QR code, but probably you'll wind up using a computer or a laptop for it. The same goes for the summary form. This is a document I give you as a rich text file format. That's a format that's a word processing document that any word processor can open. You download this from here. Probably won't be too handy to use the QR code in this case either. And you do 2 projects. Project 1 really is 2 different things. There are 5 projects that you normally would choose from. In this case, everyone does project 1.1, and then you choose one of the other 4 projects to do. So this is your marching orders for what you need to do during Unit 1 and submit. You do this throughout the unit. You lose access to this repeatable exercise at the end of the unit. This you turn in sometime perhaps in the middle of the unit if you can. I'll review it. I'll give you feedback. I'll give you back the feedback, And you have up to 7 days to revise and resubmit that with the corrections on it. And then I'll regrade it and you can get a higher score. The same goes for the projects. You get time to revise and resubmit based on feedback. That's, I think, one of the things that makes this course different from many other courses online and classroom. I see myself as a mentor. A mentor sees what you do and then tries to correct it and help you perfect it. And that's what the revision period is for, that 7 days after you get my feedback for you to do. If you miss the end date, you're out of luck on the repeatable exercise because you lose access to that. You can still turn these things in late, but you'll only get up to 70% credit for it because that's a bit of a late penalty. It still counts and it's still worth doing even if you're late. Don't lose hope, and you'll still have a chance to revise and resubmit, but you'll only get up to 70% of the credit because you're falling behind. Starting on page 27, this is information about the online exercises. They look like the image you see on this screen. In other words, there's an explanation, and then there are 10 true-false statements, and I call that a question. You check mark the true statements. Easy? Yes. But it's set up to be graded automatically in a way that gives you not much credit unless you get everything checkmarked properly. So don't expect what you get on this score to be a value from 0 to 10 based on having up to 10 things correct. Sometimes if you click one that's not true, it wipes out all the credit. Sometimes when you click one that's true, it comes up with only a small amount of credit. So you can't really tell which ones are right or wrong just by seeing the score come back. My suggestion is you do one of these questions on this, of the 4 in the repeatable exercise. You do the one question, submit, see what you got. If it's not perfect, you go back and review, and then you come and try that one question again by itself. Don't leave this to the end of the unit and try and go through it all at once. You'll be very frustrated. It's designed to be done throughout the unit using notes that I help you build up. So keep that in mind. This is what the exercise will appear like when you use this link to get to it, or this QR code. In order to get to the exercise, you do need to establish an account on the system that maintains these. This is a bit of information, and a video really, that tells you how to do that using an enrollment key that I send you in an email. So while this material is all out there on the web for anybody to see, and people are welcome to see it and use it, only enrolled students get the key, that is the enrollment key that gets them into the online exercises. One thing I forgot to mention was the questions, and there are only 4 of them. The questions are always presented in the same sequence, but the statements within them are scrambled up into a different sequence every time you do this. And that's so that you interact with the questions and you read them. That is, you interact with these statements and you actually read them. You can't just memorize the location of the check marks. This is based on research that others have done that indicates that people learn things better when they re-engage with the material like this and have to check and confirm and make sure they understand it in order to get the scores to work properly. Now, I mentioned I would help you with notes on this. Here are the start of your notes. I've listed out here the actual content of every one of the 4 questions on the exercise. This is the sequence in which the questions will come up. You can check mark these as you read the material, as you watch the videos in the playlists that I'll give to you. You should think about keeping notes here and check marking these so that when you go to do a question on the online exercise, you use these notes. Now let's suppose you don't get a perfect score on the question. That means someplace you've check marked something incorrectly, or you've forgotten to check mark something that's true. Go back and review the material. There isn't much of it, and the videos aren't very lengthy either. You go back and you review, and you can note what you now think to be the correct check marks on your notes here. You can either erase the original ones or mark them incorrect and then remark the sheet and build this up as notes. Do that for one question at a time to work through it. Just whatever piece of the material seems to be relevant, and these tend to go in the same sequence in which the pages are. When you get a perfect score on one, keep your notes, go on and do the same thing with another one, and repeat that process for the 4 questions. When you get done with that, go use your notes to do the online repeatable exercise one more time and you should get a perfect score on the entire exercise. And that's what you want to do before the end of the unit. Now, this is especially important because you're not just gaining credit during the unit for doing this. You should understand that the final exam for this course is actually based on the content of these repeatable exercise questions. So these notes are going to serve a good purpose for you later in the term when you want to review for the final exam. And by the way, the final exam is open book, and you do it entirely on the web. During a 4-day period, you choose when you do the final exam. You have 2 hours and 15 minutes to do it. These notes can be referred to at the time you're doing the final. But let me warn you, the final is not of this format. It's a different kind of exam that I've designed to be fair as an exam when it's unproctored. These are going to be valuable to you. Don't leave this exercise till the last of the unit and treat it as if it were a one-time quiz. That's not going to work for you. It will be very frustrating for you if you do that, and you will not be gaining the intended learning that occurs in this course. So that's for the exercises. Here's how you can get to them right here. If you want to see some of the background on why these kinds of exercises help learning, you can click on this link. That's entirely optional. The material here about this background is not on any final in this course. I just thought you might like some justification for why these kind of exercises are used. Another piece of work, the unit summary form, here is an example of it. You don't use this paper version here, but as this indicates, you use a link that exists elsewhere in the workbook to download this document, and it's a 2-page document. This is the back part of it. The front part, I've already answered the first question for you just to give you an idea of what the answer should look like. To answer this, you simply highlight the 3 X's and type your answer in under each question, and the amount of space between the lines will increase depending on how much you write. The answers here are intended really to be 50 words or so. They're not intended to be big essays. These are fairly focused questions, and they too are based on what you've read or viewed. Now, the projects. In this page, I'm just describing a bit of the background. You should read that. But here's what the projects look like. This is a 1-page project. You read this, and you take the steps necessary. Every one of these projects results in something that you turn in electronically. And you do that by either scanning or taking a picture of the document, if that's the nature of the project, or by creating a document and submitting that in any word processing form that you care to. Or in some cases, as indicated here, you're doing something physical and you take a picture of it, and the picture is what you send to me electronically. Everything in this course comes in electronic form. As I mentioned earlier, when you turn something like this in, I grade it and I give you written feedback, and you have 7 days to revise your work and resubmit it, and I'll regrade that. That gives you a chance to benefit from whatever I tell you in terms of feedback, and you learn the subject matter better. In Unit 1, there's a little bit less choice than there is in the other units. Here, everybody has to do this project, that is, communicating in ASCII. It's an important thing for everybody to understand. After doing that, you choose to do one of the other projects. Here you can do e-readers. Here you can compare disk and USB flash memory and see something of the economics of it. You can explore a file format that's good for transferring data from one kind of a system to another. And if you choose to do project 1.5, you compare the iPad 2 and 3 other tablet computers as described here, so that you get a current idea of where the market is for this high-end device, the iPad 2, and some competitors that are priced lower and have less in the way of capabilities. This is the kind of comparison that you need to do if you would be a wise shopper. That is, if you were actually doing your due diligence to compare products before you laid out a lot of money for any specific one. You'd want to get the one that suits your purposes best. In terms of doing that, this information on page 42 is very important. Any project that involves comparing things, you should be reading this and following this pattern for establishing the information that you need to compare, and then the various items, those features of them, listing them here. In doing that, you decide what these features are that you need to compare these devices on. You decide what those devices are, or in the case of the tablet computer comparison, I've indicated what those columns should be, 4 columns in that case, and you fill in the cells with information that you get either from the readings or from research using Google on the web. Then you assess the information this way, and you write up a short narrative with your recommendation based on this information and your stated needs. Which one of these devices would you choose? It's not really so much scientific as it is just well organized and quantified, so you have some better basis than a gut feel for deciding things. The memory comparison project makes use of that same form of chart, so definitely for project 1.3, page 42 is relevant, and for project 1.5, page 42 is relevant. One other thing I'd like to mention, in Unit 1, as in the other units, although here you're doing this project, everybody is, and you're doing one additional one that's required, if you wanted to do extra credit, you could pick out another project to do. So you might do 3 projects and thereby build a little insurance because it counts for extra credit. Not as much as a regular project would, but some extra credit. That's something you might want to consider if you've done not as well on one of the exercises as you had hoped. It's a way of offsetting the loss of credit in one area by credit in another. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You can either text me or call me on the cell phone or email me at the dedicated email address for the course. I'm ready and willing to answer your questions from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. any day. If you have any questions at all, please do contact me. I'm here as your mentor, and I will certainly give you as much help as possible in understanding this material and doing well in the course. My personal feeling is you took this course to learn something, but also to get an A. My job in this course as your mentor is to help you earn that A. I don't give out grades, you earn them. I'll help you earn them, but the biggest advice I can give you is to start early, because the term moves quickly, and to not put off doing this work, because putting things off is usually a recipe for disaster. Time will pass, it will be more of a crunch for you to get work done, and before you know it, you fall behind. And that's not a good thing to do. So if you have something that's holding you up, ask me about it. Let me try and give you a hand in overcoming any hurdles so you can continue to move forward in the course. The course is actually done entirely online, and I don't do classroom lectures. I instead do lectures like this that you can listen to at any time and listen to again if you've missed any of the information. I hope you enjoy the course.